So we are hosting this webinar as we have had hundreds of questions come in from the call for proposals. And so Stephanie, after I give a brief overview on the PSIPSE Collaborative and Hajar shares a bit about the RFP, my colleague Stephanie will take about 10 to 15 minutes to respond to some of the more common questions that have come in thus far. We'll then open the floor to question and answer sessions. While we'll do our best to answer everyone's questions in either text response or verbally, it might not be possible to cover everyone's questions over the next hour. So following this webinar, we'll be posting the recording of this session on the PSIPSE website, and it can also be rewatched at any time using the link that you received to participate. We'll also be posting an updated frequently asked question document, which will summarize the questions and answers that Stephanie will be providing during the FAQ section of our webinar. Please note, during this session, all questions will need to be asked via the question chat box on the control panel of your screen. You'll see that one moment as I pull that up so you can see that, the questions section. If you type your question, we will do our best to respond to that during the session, either in text or verbally over the course of the webinar. For ease of reference, we suggest that you expand this question box. Actually, we've changed that setting, so it should be expanded for you. So those questions that have already been answered by text response should be appearing in your text box. And we ask that you keep an eye on those and look to see if questions that you have as they come up have already been addressed, as this will enable us to answer as many questions as possible. So I'll start with a brief introduction to the PSIPSE. Some of you might be familiar with the collaborative, but I know many of you might not. The spread of primary schools globally has been one of the most widely successful going to scale stories of the last century, but progress is sorely needed at the secondary level. Globally, over 200 million secondary school-aged youth between 12 and 17 are out of school, and many more who are in school are not learning due to poor quality education. Children unable to enter and complete secondary school, given a daunting array of socioeconomic, cultural, and logistical barriers, and those who overcome these barriers and attend secondary school are still held back by outdated curricula and pedagogies that often offer inadequate preparation for the 21st century. Recognizing the magnitude of this challenge, in 2012, a group of private donors came together to promote action on these pressing challenges and encourage a new wave of innovation around secondary education in developing countries. Together, this group formed a partnership to strengthen innovation and practice in secondary education. Today, PSIPSE donor members include Dubai Cares, Echidna Giving, MacArthur Foundation, the MasterCard Foundation, and an anonymous donor. Through strategic grant making, partnership building, and learning, PSIPSE donors seek to foster innovation, generate learning on problems and solutions, and facilitate systemic change in secondary education. Ultimately, by improving the quality and relevance of secondary education, PSIPSE seeks to help marginalized youth reach their potential to become active, productive citizens who contribute to their communities and foster economic growth. Under 3 previous calls for proposals, nearly $50 million in grants have been made to 59 projects that pilot, adapt, or scale innovations or conduct research on critical issues in secondary education. You can see the full list of grants that have been funded to date on the PSIPSE website or on Fluid Review, where you're registered to apply to submit your proposal. The homepage has that full link on the homepage links. So grants are currently active in 8 countries: India, Nigeria, and East Africa, in DRC, Kenya, Malawi, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda. And projects supported by the collaborative seek to improve access to secondary education, strengthen core competencies such as literacy and numeracy, and help youth develop the skills they need to transition to employment and adulthood. We're thrilled to continue to grow this portfolio of grantee partners and support new projects through this, our fourth call for proposals. This fourth call for proposals, the specific geographic and thematic focus for each call is based on the conditions in target countries and priorities of donor members through this period. So this year, you'll see that the call is focused on improving quality in secondary education in 4 East African countries. Those countries are Kenya, Malawi, Tanzania, and Uganda. Through this call, donors will support projects that pilot innovations, expand and adapt successful models, inspire collaboration, put evidence into action, and research critical questions about how to improve quality in secondary education while aiming to create systematic change in the sector at the local or national level. You've all already received and likely reviewed the call for proposals, as you've already registered to submit proposals via the online portal. I would note that while you can find an offline version of the proposal questions on the Fluid Review homepage, as well as in the handouts for this webinar, which are on the dashboard that you have just above your chat window. You must submit your proposals via the actual online portal by the December 23rd deadline, and those proposals submitted by email, fax, or post will not be considered. I'll turn now to my colleague Hajra at MasterCard, provide a bit more specifics around this year's call for proposals before we jump into frequently asked questions and a Q&A.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think we can hear you, Hajra.
Okay, great. So my name is Hajra from the MasterCard Foundation. So I will highlight 2 features of this RFP. One is the sub-theme, and 2 proposal selection criteria. So this time, SIPSE took a slightly different approach to identify sub-themes or topics that you will address in your proposals. We commissioned FIDEP, it's African Institute for Development Policy, to conduct a field scan in the 4 target countries. They had consultations with Ministry of Education, Ministry of Finance, other development actors in the countries, select teachers and head teachers to basically understand current needs and priorities as they relate to improving quality of secondary education. A good range of topics emerged in this field scan, but SIPSE Collaborative chose to pick only 3 areas of priority where innovations are required or evidence building of what works and what doesn't is critical. So these themes are listed in the RFP. The first one is build on existing policies and priorities for student learning. We know that there is a robust policy environment in all of these 4 countries when it comes to quality of secondary education. So we thought, if organizations could capitalize on these existing policies and programs, then, there will be an alignment of efforts between what you do and what the countries, your countries are already doing. The second theme is enhanced teacher capacity and professional development. It is self-explanatory. This area was expressed as a need and priority by all of the target countries. The third theme is improve school and systems management and efficiency. And this is about bringing improvement in efficiency at the school and district level. It is about enhancing the capacity or leadership, improving coordination between schools, among schools, between school and district, and improving systems that could include, how you track student performance or how you track, teacher attendance. So just bringing efficiency within the system. These themes, as you see, are broad enough, and we hope that organizations will not find them limiting. At the same time, we encourage organizations to not feel restricted and present ideas that fit better within, their own context, country context, regional context, or district context. The second thing I want to touch on briefly is the selection criteria. Each donor enthusiastically, stands behind this RFP, and we are very keen and excited to see the results. The high-level criteria that your application will be assessed against is, based on these, 5 areas. One is project quality. We'd like to see, what the quality of your idea is or project design is. Then impact, and then feasibility, sustainability and scalability, and results and evaluation framework. There is a lot of emphasis within SIPSE about on M&E and learning, because the idea is that we introduce innovations, we introduce new ideas or new ways of doing things, whether it's within innovations bucket or expanding or any of the 4 buckets, and then generate enough evidence so that we could work with other actors and scale it up either horizontally or vertically. So now I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie, who's going to walk us through some of the frequently asked questions before we open the floor for live questions.
Thank you, Hajra. Can everybody hear me?
I'm able to hear you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Okay. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to do a screen share here. Okay, perfect. All right, so we are going to run through some of the frequently asked questions that we've heard both today in the questions that all of you are submitting now and that we have received up until now. So all of the questions and answers that we discuss today through these frequently asked questions will be posted online on the PSIPSE website by tomorrow. So first question, what should I do if my project fits in more than one category of the request for proposals? We ask that you apply to only one category, even though we know that some of your projects may fit in multiple. If you're applying to the collaboration category, please note that the core of those projects should be for facilitating and coordinating collaboration rather than implementing a project collaboratively. Are there any specific application requirements for a consortium of organizations? Yes, if your organization is applying on behalf of a consortium of organizations, only one of the organizations can submit the application for the proposed project. The applicant organization should be the legal entity who intends to have sole direction, control, and supervision and use of the grant funds. Government organizations can be a part of the consortium, but they cannot be the lead. Is this a pooled fund? No. If you receive a grant through this request for proposals, it will be from one or two of the donors rather than being from the whole of the SIPSE. Can the deadline be extended, and when is it? While we recognize that the deadline is very close to the holidays, we are unable to extend it at this time due to the donor timelines. So we appreciate the earlier you can get these in. The deadline is December 23rd, 2016 at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Can I receive detailed feedback on my proposal if it is not funded? Unfortunately, due to the volume of applications that we are expecting, we are not able to provide individualized feedback to each applicant. When will funding decisions be made? When will the funds become available? And when can I start my project? Unfortunately, this is all going to be determined by the individual funders with the projects that advance to a final application round. So there is no established timeline, but we will be communicating with each applicant as we move forward. If the lead organization on my project is not registered in country, will I be disqualified from consideration? No, you will not be disqualified, although organizations should be able to demonstrate ties with the country for which they are applying. Are current SIPSE grantees eligible to apply? Yes, we do encourage all existing PSIPSE grantees to apply, but noting that the grantees from Nigeria and India cannot apply if they are applying to continue the work in Nigeria and India. It must be in collaboration with one of the current focus countries. Does my organization have to be a US 501c3 organization to be eligible for funding? No, but organizations must be legally registered with appropriate charter documentation in the countries with which they work. Private sector entities must be working in a nonprofit capacity on the proposed project in order to be considered for funding, and individuals are not eligible to apply. Can I apply for a project to build schools, dorms, or student hostels? No, PSIPSE does not support infrastructure, including the building of brick and mortar schools, computer labs, dorms, etc. Can I apply for a project to pay for uniforms, textbooks, or computers? This is a question that we have been getting a lot through the questions function today. This is allowed to be a part of your project, but it cannot be the complete project. Can I submit an application for a project in a country that is not listed in the call for proposals? No, you cannot. Applications for proposed projects in a country other than those listed in the geographic focus section of the call for proposals will not be considered. The only exception is for collaboration projects involving existing grantees within the SIPSE portfolio in countries not included on this year's call for proposals. How can I get access to the proposal questions offline? You can find an offline version of the proposal questions on the homepage of sipse.fluidreview.com by clicking number 5-proposal questions. They can also be found at the end of the call for proposals page on the SIPSE website, as well as in the handouts tool on the toolbar for this webinar. Can I still edit my proposal if I move on to the next page? Yes, you are able to make revisions until you hit submit on your proposal. We do advise that you draft your responses in a separate document and copy and paste them into the online portal once they are ready to avoid losing any information. Is there a limit to funding on overhead? This depends on which funding the project. each of us have different requirements. So we do ask that your budget for the project that you are submitting clearly details what is included in the direct costs, including line items for project activities, travel, staff, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and communication and dissemination of your budget. Staff costs should be listed separately and include the percentage of each staff person's time that will be spent on the project during the project year. Please structure your budget to show expenses for each expense category and show annual expenses in each of the project years. You should also indicate the annual subtotal for each project year. In regards to your indirect costs, please clearly show the detail of what is included within your indirect costs, including a detailed explanation of how indirect costs are calculated, and provide examples of the types of costs your organization considers to be indirect. Is there a required budget template? Do you have any guidance on how to provide a budget? So SIPSE does not have one standard budget template. Specific directions regarding requirements for the budget are detailed in the proposal application questions. If you look at the budget section on the proposal of the portal or on page 2 of the proposal questions document, you should be able to find those. The project budget should indicate the approximate amount requested by the applicant and list the principal categories of expenses. All budgets must be submitted in US dollars. Likewise, your applications must be in English. If you're converting into US dollars, please provide the exchange rate and the dates that those exchange rates were made. In cases where a full project budget is not requested from SIPSE, please include a column specifying the amount of each line item being requested from SIPSE and a column specifying the amount from other sources. What if my project budget is more than the funding cap for the category I am applying to? While the overall project budget can be more than the budget window, the amount being requested of PSIPSE should not exceed the amount specified in the call for proposals. We will not be funding the full level of need, even if it is above that funding cap. You are allowed to seek other funding from other sources to meet the full need of your project. Budget caps. What are the funding? Oh, that is not supposed to be there. For innovation, it is $500,000 per year. For expanding and adapting, it is $1 million per year. For collaboration, it is $500,000 a year, or supposed for the project period. Expanding and adapting, it's $1 million over the project life, $1,000 over the project span. Evidence to action, it is $500,000 of the project lifespan. Projects should be proposed for 2 to 4 years. So with that said, we are going to move through some of the questions that have been submitted today. So I am going to turn this over to Michelle.
Sorry, I had myself muted while I was talking. I'm giving you one moment to change presenters. Thank you so much for answering those, Stephanie. I think that will answer a good number of the questions that we're seeing come up so far. That being said, we do have other new questions coming up in our chats, and so we will do our best to run through as many of those as we can, alternating between donors in answering those questions. And we are all trying to respond to those questions as they come in text. And so you'll see when you look at the question window box that where there's a check mark, there should be a response to a number of the questions that have emerged. Some of those questions I do believe have been answered already in the frequently asked questions, and so we are going to do our best to get to those that have not been. I will take a first question and then ask Stephanie or Hajra to be looking for other questions while I'm responding to that first question and jump in. And I would note the first question that I saw is whether a project can be both research and implementation. This is unlike, so similarly to the project categories, where those buckets of innovation, expand and adapt, we recognize those aren't mutually exclusive. We also recognize that a number of implementation projects will have research components. So if your project is principally an implementation project and there is a research component, be it monitoring and evaluation, learning, external evaluation, please proceed in applying to the implementation project phase. So do not select your project as a research project. The research project category is where a project is principally core research. So if it is a research organization coming in to do an external evaluation of an existing project that's being implemented, but funds are not being used for the implementation of the project, solely for the evaluation, if it's desk research, field research, those are what we're looking to indicate in the research check, as you'll get some different questions in your application. So if your project involves funding for the implementation of a project on the ground and is not principally research, then that we recognize that there are research components of that, but please do apply as an implementation project. And Stephanie or Hajra, I'll open to you to answer the next question if you have one identified.
This is Hajra. So I'll take the question about the question is, what if the applying organization is not locally registered? But it seems they do have a local partner in the country. So I think this is related to the request we have made about country presence, that the applying organization should have country presence. I think it's okay if you are not registered in the country itself, but have a local partner. What we expect is that even if it's a consultant or local partner, you should be able to demonstrate that you have had a history of working relationship with the partner in the country. If it's a consultant, there is a demonstrated a commitment of that individual to the applying or principal organization. So mainly some tie that you can demonstrate there is between yourself and the local partner or consultant who is present in the country.
I have a question about to what extent should technology be used in proposed projects? We do not have any guidelines on that at this point. Generally, I would say that to the extent that it makes sense in the setting in which you are working, that is the extent to which you should be using technology.
Great. And another question that I see here is whether someone's hoping for a bit of clarity on the comments made about funding for projects in India and Nigeria. What was meant in that frequently asked question, just to clarify that a bit, we no new funding for new projects under this call will this call does not include India and Nigeria, as had been the case in previous calls. So new projects seeking funding under this call are limited to the 4 countries in East Africa identified within the call. That being said, there is some where a project, where there might be a collaboration project between or among SIPSE grantees, which may be coming out of the RFP and involve existing SIPSE grantees in those countries. Those can be considered. However, our recommendation is limiting in scope to the 4 East African countries. This is sort of the exception where there might be existing SIPSE grantees involved from those former countries. So no, there's no new projects in those countries.
I'm happy to take the next one. I have a question about whether organizations that have never received funding from any major donor in the past are eligible. Yes, you're absolutely eligible, and we encourage you to apply.
So we've received a number of questions about whether you can apply for more than the caps in the detailed in each of the funding categories. And so we would no, those are caps. So those are funding limits on what should be requested from this call for proposals. That being said, if your project itself costs more, that's not a cap on how much your total project budget can be. If you are able to seek funding from other sources, that's a cap on what SIPSE is funding likely under each project window. So donors will make the final decision on the amount each project is funded, but those are the caps that have been set by donors and the maximum likely to be allocated to a given category. So what we do suggest is if your total project budget exceeds the cap and you're looking for other donors, or you have secured other funders to cover the cost, that be itemized in your budget. So you have 2 columns, and with a column that shows the costs allocated from the request amount requested from SIPSE, as well as a column indicating the amount being requested from other outside sources. One other thing I'd note, just seeing a number of the questions coming in to make sure that it's clear, is the SIPSE, the call for proposals itself, as I'm sure all of you have seen the call that went out, was a short document of about 6 pages. At the end of that document are a series of links. Those links, when you log into the Fluid Review portal, they are on the homepage of the Fluid Review portal where you sign in. That's the call for proposals. It includes funding categories document, proposal questions document, application instructions. There's a host of documents, about 9, that all together make up the full call for proposals. So in preparing your proposal, you should read carefully all of those documents, as the information that a number of people are asking can be found in, for example, the funding categories document has the detailed information on budget caps, funding windows, all are 2 to 4 year funding windows, has more detail on what we are looking for in each of those categories. One other thing I would flag that has come up in emails has been about the collaboration category. That's something new this year. And when we speak about collaboration, there is project collaboration, and in that case, we would suggest that if you are expanding a project and partnering with a new organization, so that way you're collaborating with an organization in a country, for example, to bring your project to a new geography, or you're partnering with an academic organization to do research on your project, those collaborations we would see as likely, and it's at your judgment, but likely fitting into, for example, an expanding and adapt project, or if you're piloting a new project, but doing it in partnership with another organization, that's probably an innovation project. The collaboration projects are really looking at how organizations might come together and work collaboratively to advance common agendas. So where the collaboration is itself the core of the project, and examples might include convening of existing SIPSE grantees to work on communications support or work on collective learning across the portfolio. I don't, if other donors on the call have any other examples or want to speak to what that collaboration window a bit, I would open it to you. I think that question has emerged quite a bit.
So there are quite a few questions about budget. I would say that in the application, we have requested that you submit a high-level budget. We have provided some, guidelines that you submit the budget for maybe various categories. But we purposely kept it simple so that it's not too cumbersome on you, and for ease of review and consistent review on our side when we review the applications. If your project is considered favorably by any of the 4 or 5 donors, at that point, when we get into further discussions or negotiations with the organization, we will then share with you our own detailed budget template and work with you together on that budget template. But at this point, to keep it simple, we request just a high-level budget with your application.
Okay, here's a quick one here about serving citizens from other countries that are living in one of the focus countries. Yes, absolutely, you are welcome to include them within your project proposal as long as you are working within one of the focus countries. Another question about the question in the proposal asking for the context in which your project will be operating and what we mean by context. We are specifically looking to understand more about that particular location and what's happening there and how that influences the project you are proposing. One other really quick one about the proposal structure. When you get onto the Fluid Review site and are filling that out, we've tried to make this as easy as possible in that they are just text boxes. So there is no formatting needed in filling out the proposal.
Great. Another question that came up about the formatting question, or about the online proposal submission, I'm sorry, is whether or not you're able to make changes if you've already submitted the, as you all have already submitted the expression of interest. So whether, for example, if your budget in developing your proposal, your budget has changed, or you've decided that your project perhaps fits better in a different category than you had indicated in the expression of interest. That is absolutely fine. The expression of interest, no information from the expression of interest will, while it's maintained, anything submitted in the proposal will override information previously collected in the expression of interest. So if you change the category that you're applying to, that is completely acceptable. We recognize that a number of people had submitted the expression of interest before the full call was released, so with limited information. We also recognize that budgets and other specific information is likely to change as you develop your full proposals. So you will not be penalized, and there is no issue in changing any information in the proposal from what had been submitted in your expression of interest. Another learning from the expression of interest that I think is important to flag is that, and it's quite technical, but we had a number of people run into this problem in the expression of interest round, is when you complete your proposal online, you will need to press Finish Proposal. You'll click Finish Application. That will not submit your proposal. You'll be taken back to what is your home screen of sorts. It is the screen that you see with, if you have multiple projects being submitted, all of those project proposal forms for you to go into. And there's a green button there that you need to press Submit. So do be sure that even if you've finished the application, once finished, that you've actually gone in and pressed Submit My Proposal.
A lot of the questions we're getting now are on budget caps. So just to reiterate, all of the categories are for a 2 to 4 year project lifespan. And over that 2 to 4 years, for innovation, you are allowed to request up to $500,000. For expanding and adapting, you are allowed to request up to $1 million. For collaboration, it's up to $500,000. And for evidence to action, it's up to $500,000. And those are all in US dollars. We also have a question here about if you're an organization that has an international headquarters and a registered chapter or branch, which one should you apply from? I think either are fine, whichever you feel more comfortable with sending your application from. From our perspective, there is not a difference.
I'm going to answer a few questions quickly. There's a question about what it means, what MEL stands for, MEL, and it's monitoring, evaluation, and learning. I'm sure it is spelled out somewhere in the documents, but that's what it is: monitoring, evaluation, and learning. There's a question about cost share. There is no requirement as such for cost share, but if part of your project cost is supported by other sources, whether it's your own organization's funds or some other external donor, then by all means you can put that in the. I think there is room in the budget where you can mention, but this is not a requirement.
We have a question here about what if you miscategorize yourself within one of those 4 categories, and will that disqualify you? The answer is no. We'll just recategorize it into what we see fit.
And to that point, if you've already submitted your proposal and you have miscategorized yourself, please, if you've already hit the submit button on the proposal, with the wrong category, you can go ahead and send an email to rfp@psipse.org. Again, that's rfp@psipse.org. That email address is in the call itself as well. Just indicate in your email that you have miscategorized yourself in the submitted proposal, and we can fix that from the back end. That being said, if you miscategorized in the submission of expression of interest round, that's fine. There's no need to notify us. Just make sure that in the proposal you put the correct category. And so the only reason to email for that change would be if you've already hit submit on your proposal.
There's a question about duration and whether a project could be less than 2 years. It's not recommended, but if you have a solid rationale, please, provide that. It also depends on, the category. Maybe a research project could be a 1 year, but it's not recommended. For example, with the expanding and adapting, you can't expect a year, a project which is 1 year duration. Same for innovation, maybe evidence to action, but again, it's not recommended because you need time to build, relationships and even for our grant making process, it takes more than a year. So to be able to work with the donor, so we recommend more than a year. But if you have a rationale, then it's okay.
We have a lot of questions here. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
We have a lot of questions here about the purchase of things like cars, computers, mobile equipments, things of that nature, whether these are allowable expenses. We have no one policy around this because each donor approaches it a little bit differently. If it is something you need to do your project, then please do include it within the project budget as long as it is not school infrastructure, meaning you are building schools or aspects of the school themselves.
Great. And then we've also had some questions about whether if your project is could fit under multiple caps or is combining different buckets. So if you're doing a project that you consider both innovation and collaboration, whether you can combine the budget caps. So no, you have to select one bucket to be applying to, and the max budget cap is whatever that window is. So there is no option to sort of merge and say you're applying to your project fits across multiple categories and as such apply for the combined total of those two categories. You must limit to the cap for a single category to which you are primarily applying. Additionally, I've noted here that people are having trouble with the system is, while you can go back and forth, so you can submit a page of the proposal and go on to the next as long as it's completed and then return back and make changes, that people have had issues as in order to move to the next page, you need to have completed the information requested on the first, on the prior page. So you can't leave boxes and return to them in the application. That's something we're resolving in the system. We've not previously been aware of until yesterday. So we should have that resolved in the next 48 hours so that you'll be able to go between pages and leave questions blank while you go in between. In the meantime, or should that not be something we're able to rectify, but I think we will, if you just put in a given text box, hold text, or any text to hold that space, it will allow you to go to the next page, or put in a blank document if it's a whole document space that you need to complete. That being said, it should be resolved in the next 48 hours, so you won't have to have completed a given page to move on to the next.
Okay, so two quick questions here. One is about whether we can include boys in projects in addition to girls. The answer on that is yes, absolutely. Second one, are you allowed to change the amount of funding that you apply for once the grant is approved? No. So do take into consideration all of the possible costs up until that budget cap.
There's a question about how we define innovation. So for us, it's for SIPSE, it's anything that's bold, a bold idea, some new way of doing things, or new way of addressing long-standing and deeply rooted problems. Innovation could also mean that some of the strategies you propose may have been experimented elsewhere in Africa or Asia or elsewhere, but it is bold and new in the proposed context.
So we have a couple of questions about organizations that have not previously received funding from major donors and how to handle the donor referees. And I would ask Haj or Stephanie to speak to how best to do this. It's come up quite a few times, and right now we request 3, require 1. But if you've not had funding from a major international donor, Haj or Stephanie, do you have any guidance for people on how they might handle that?
I think on my end, if there is any local donor or someone who's not major, that's absolutely fine for us to receive. If you have not received funding in the past, I would just be clear on that in the proposal. But Hajra, I would love to hear your thoughts.
It's the same for us. Be as clear in the proposal as possible.
Great. We have a lot of questions here about timeframes, meaning can a project be less than 1 year, or can it be more than 4 years, and a couple about if it can be somewhere in between 2 and 4. So for the purposes of the call for proposals, a project should not be less than 2 years, and it should not be more than 4 years. It can be 2.5 years, it can be 3 years, as long as it is somewhere in between 2 to 4 years.
And there's also questions about the caps and whether they are project lifetime caps or annual, and the caps indicated in the documents are for the full project duration. So if it's a 2-year grant for $500,000, that is over the course of 2 years, so $250,000 per year, however it's broken down, but those are not annual caps, those are total project caps. And also there was asked whether you can apply in multiple countries. So yes, a project can be in more than one of the target countries.
We've had a lot of questions about indirect cost caps. There is no cap on these. It is whatever your organization needs to be effective on this project. And you must make sure that your budget makes clear what is included within your indirect costs.
There's a question. Can a project integrate primary school and secondary school interventions? This is, PSIPSE is primarily or mainly focused on secondary education. However, if your project is about transitions and improving transition from primary to secondary, then we could perhaps see, how working with primary would make sense, but PSIPSE focuses on secondary education.
We have a lot of questions about word limits on these questions and whether it will cut you off after you hit the maximum and whether word limits means character limits. The word limits do not count the number of characters that you hit. It is just the amount of words, and yes, you are expected to follow the defined word limits, and I believe we have built the system so that it will not take more words than the limit.
That is correct. And it was also asked whether, in a number of ways, whether Indian organizations can work in the 4 countries applied, or whether countries not, organizations not in those based in those countries, and that was spoken to in the frequently asked questions, but it's come up a number of times again. So just to be clear, yes, no, you need not be an organization based in one of those 4 countries, but please, you do need to make clear your networks, connections, relationships, and ties within the country in which you're proposing work.
There's a question about scholarships. SIPSE doesn't encourage organizations to use our funds to provide scholarships, but if your project design is such that a little scholarship or money for, let's say, uniform purchase of uniform or purchase of stationery is required as an impetus, then perhaps you could use or include that component, but we discourage including scholarships in the intervention.
And just to make clear, there's a couple of questions about it that seems to be some confusion. All projects, all proposals must be submitted on the online RFP portal. So that's SIPSE, PSIPSE fluid review, fluidreview.sipse.com, which is on the screen right now. If you've been invited to this webinar, you did submit your registration. And to submit a proposal, you'll go into the same account that you created to register, click submit the proposal, and that will bring you to an online proposal form. That's a number of pages, and you are required to submit that information in the text boxes and through attachments in that online portal. And the proposals will not be reviewed unless they are submitted that way. So we are out of time as we've come to our 1 hour mark. For donors, is there anything else that anyone would like to add or wrap up with at this point before we close? I give a quick synopsis on next steps. Great. Well, I know we have not been able to get to every question. We will be posting after this webinar, the webinar itself on the SIPSE website. You can also watch it later through the original link that you had to join. The questions that were submitted by text, we've done our best to respond as they've come. So do look at what's been prompted there. Where there are questions, well, we won't be able to answer all of these in the frequently asked questions document. We will, where there are questions that have been asked by multiple individuals and we've not spoken to on this webinar, we will add those to the frequently asked questions document that will be posted on both the Fluid Review homepage as well as the SIPSE website. And that will include all of the frequently asked questions that have come up via email inquiries on this RFP, so the ones that Stephanie walked us through in the beginning of this webinar, as well as some additional questions coming out of the webinar. We very much appreciate everyone's time and engagement on this webinar, and their time going into what we know is a big undertaking of a proposal process, and we are really looking forward to reading all of your proposals in the coming months. And we thank everyone for the time and energy that you're putting into this very important work. Stephanie or Hadrat, is there anything else before we wrap up?
I just want to thank all of you for your participation today and the quality of your questions. We really look forward to reading all of your applications, and we're very motivated to keep going forward with each of you.
Thanks so much, everyone. And again, you'll see the frequently asked questions, and this video will be posted in the next 24 to 48 hours on Fluid Review site, as well as SIPSE.org. Thanks so much.